In this demonstration you learn how to use the blob continuation token. Let's switch to Visual Studio. Here I've opened the Coffee Video Storage class of the Wired Brain Coffee solution. I scroll down to the list video blobs async method. In the previous clip we have implemented these two lines to list the blobs of the Coffee Videos container. To the list blobs segmented async method we passed the value null. As you know, this method takes a blob continuation token. But for what is this blob continuation token actually for? When you look at the return value, you can see that the method returns a task of blob result segment. A segment means that this could be just a segment of the total list of blobs in your container. In fact, this list blobs segmented async method calls the REST API of the blob service, and you will get maximum 5000 items from that API. So if you have stored more than 5000 items in your blob storage, you have to use the blob continuation token to get the next items. Let me show you how to do this. When you look at the blob result segment object, you can see that it has a results property. This property contains the returned items from the list blobs segmented async method. We use the results property already in our code to get the cloud block blobs. Beside the results property, the blob result segment object has a continuation token property. As you can see, this read-only property is of type blob continuation token. If you got all the items from the container, this continuation token property will be null. But if there are more items in your container, the property contains a blob continuation token that you can use to call the list blob segmented async method again. Then you will get the next items from your container. So now let's see how we can use the continuation token in our code. Let's just create here at the beginning a blob continuation token variable, and let's assign the value null to it. Now we pass that variable to the list blob segmented async method. After we have got the blob result segment, we assign the continuation token from that result segment to our token variable. Now if this token variable is not null, we need to call the list blob segmented async method again to get all the blobs of the Coffee Videos container. So what we need is a loop. So let's create one. Let's execute these 3 lines of code while the token variable is not null. So now we have implemented the logic to use a blob continuation token. Let's add a breakpoint here and let's run the application. The breakpoint is hit and I press F10 to step to the next statement. I hover the continuation token and you can see it is null. Of course, we don't have more than 5000 items in our Coffee Videos container. When I hover the blob result segment, you can see that we have all the 5 videos in the results property. So let's stop the application again. Now this list video blobs async method returns a list of all the cloud block blobs in the Coffee Videos container, even if there are more than 5000 items. But instead of getting the maximum of 5000 items from the list blobs segmented async method, you can also get a smaller number. As you can see, the method has different overloads, and this overload has a max results parameter. You can use this parameter to specify the maximum results you want to get. This can be useful if you want to build a pagination, so that users can browse through the list of blobs over different pages. Now let's just try this overload. I pass null for the prefix. I want to use flat blob listing. This means we won't get cloud blob directories from that method. We just get the blobs, even if the names contain a path. So let's set this to true. Then we need to specify blob listing details. That's an enumeration. We just use the value none. And then we can specify the max results parameter. Let's set this one to 2. Then comes the blob continuation token, and for the other parameters I just pass in null to that method. Now let's add a breakpoint here and let's run the application again. The breakpoint is hit, I press F10 to step to the next statement. I hover the blob result segment object and you can see the results property contains just 2 items. And also the continuation token property contains a blob continuation token. When I expand the results property and I expand the first item, you can see it's the artist MP4 file. Let's expand the second item, and you can see this is the author MP4 file. Now let's go back to the code. Let's hit F10, F10 again. Now the condition is checked. Of course, the token is not null, and the list blob segmented async method is called again. Now we get the next blob result segment, and again in this result segment we have two items. When I expand the results, you can see the first item is the coffee machine MP4 file, and the second item is the programmer MP4 file. Again, the continuation token is not null. So let's hit F10. Now you can see we have 4 blobs in our Cloud Block Blobs list. And as you know, our container contains 5 items. So the token is again not null, and the list blob segmented async method is called again. Now we got another blob result segment that contains just one result. And when I expand this, you can see this is the skateboarder MP4 file. The continuation token is this time null because there are no more blobs in the coffee videos container. So now this token is null and the loop is done. Let's hit F5 to continue. Now you can see a list of all the 5 videos in the application. So now you have seen how you can implement a pagination with this max results parameter. But in our application, I just use the simple overload of the list blobs segmented async method that just takes a token. Now, as we use the token, our code works with any number of blobs in the coffee videos container. In the next clip, we will use the prefix parameter of the list video blobs async method to filter the blobs with a prefix.